All right, we've got a lot of ground to cover in a short period of time, so this may be like a lightning round. But Carly, I'm going to start with you. With the rise of all this pro-BDS activities on campus, the ACLJ has successfully represented both students and faculty members. Tell us what the applicable laws are, which students should be aware of, and some of the legal issues that they face.
I think this is a crucial question, and for this reason. We have to be creative in our strategies, and we have to be aggressive in implementing those strategies. In order to do that, students and other members of the community who are fighting this have to be aware of some of these issues and what's available to them, and also some of the pitfalls. If we're talking about on campus, you have to be aware of the policies, the governing rules on campus in the first place. If you don't know what those rules are, you don't know whether they're being violated. So that's a front end action, kind of a research project. But if you're on campus and you're going to be engaged in this fight, you have to know what the policies are, the applicable policies, whether we're talking about discrimination policies, things like the governing documents. I mean, these are things that have been instrumental in the cases that we've handled, governing documents of student government associations, because some BDS resolutions that have been proposed have actually run afoul of the governing documents of that body. And so it takes that kind of initiative and understanding to be able to identify and say, hey, no, you can't do this. And then obviously, the grassroots work of getting the coalition of folks together to fight that. Also, the issues of recording laws. I mean, this may not seem like something that you would naturally think of, but it's actually been instrumental in some of the situations that we've handled, being aware of the recording laws in the jurisdiction that you're in. Is it a one-party state? Is it a two-party state? Can I record an event that's happening? Can I record a conversation maybe that's taking place? These are some things that have actually been really instrumental. You also don't want to be on the wrong side of that. If there's a conversation that's taking place that you want to have a record of, being aware of those types of things. And I don't want to get too nuanced, and I have to say that Justice Rubenstein's comment about the fact that this is a nuanced area, and so there's not any easy answer to this, but understanding the difference in terms of free speech, First Amendment type issues, what is protected and what isn't protected. Not that students and community members necessarily are expected to understand all those nuances, but just to be aware that just because speech is taking place, it may be protected, it may not be, but being aware mentally, of asking that question of yourself, might this be a problem?
Well, I want to turn to Mark for this question. Mark, recently at UC Irvine, students associated with the group Students for Justice of Palestine, they basically crashed a movie that was held about the IDF. There was profanities, there was blocking of doors, there was all sorts of conduct. When does speech cross the line from protected free speech to unprotected free speech that is actually legally actionable?
Here's the bottom line, and I want to really address the students in the room to make sure that they have it pretty clear. First of all, in both public and private institutions, it's important to note that the freedom of speech and even offensive speech should be cherished and respected, because that's part of what makes our democracy so great. But not all speech is protected. And the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has made it very clear that there are times when speech crosses over into harassment and invidious discrimination. So let's get specific, okay? The standard comes from a case called Davis versus Monroe, and it's pretty simple. Harassment can take many forms. It can be verbal, it can be written, but whatever form it takes, if it is severe, persistent, or pervasive enough to limit or deny a student's ability to participate in or benefit from an educational program, that speech is not protected. And unfortunately, over the last few years, we've seen that happen from coast to coast, from the UC system to the CUNY system, but it won't happen anymore because we're not going to let it. Just last month, after BDS... I'll tell you a very quick story. Just last month, after a BDS resolution passed at CUNY, several of the people on this panel, including Carly and Stuart at the ACLJ, in conjunction with other organizations, including Stand With Us and the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law, we sent a letter to the university, and we reminded them of their responsibilities under the law. They have a responsibility to make sure their campus is a safe, non-harassing, non-discriminatory environment for students and employees, and guess what? 6 days later, the chancellor himself wrote back, and he said that he's putting together a task force and is going to recommend some of the various suggestions in our letter. But that's not the only strategy we're using. Academics do have a lot of freedom to talk about their views, but they can't single out one group and make them feel uncomfortable. Universities and academic organizations can make all kinds of statements, but they have to be in keeping with their own missions and their charters. So, for instance, in 2013, many of you know, the American Studies Association, an academic association for the study of American culture, suddenly decided that they were going to enter into politics full steam ahead, and they voted to boycott Israel. And so last month, the Brandeis Center led the charge to sue them in D.C. for violating their own charter and violating the D.C. law governing nonprofit organizations. And so the basic message for the students and other people here today is that bottom line, whether it's local, state, or federal law, whether it's a public or a private university, we have this, and we're going to win.
I want to direct this question to Elizabeth. Two of the primary myths and lies advanced by the BDS movement is that Israel is in violation of international law by illegally occupying the Palestinian people and committing war crimes on Gaza. Could you share with our audience and our college students why that is not true, so when they go back to their college campuses and when they go back to their homes, they're well equipped and they can understand how to counter all of these arguments?
You're absolutely right that the myths of occupation and war crimes are the key myths that are used by the BDS organizers. This is just a denial of Jewish history, and a lot of that history has to do with the UN, and also it perverts a lot of UN resolutions. For instance, we often hear that Israel is violating rights of refugees. You always hear the statements about UN Resolution 181, 181, and 194. These resolutions are supposed to deal with a resolution of the refugees of both parties, namely the close to 1 million Jews who had to flee from Arab nations in 1948 through 1951, as well as Palestinians Arabs who actually left on their own at the instigation of the Arab High Command. Many people seem to forget that the Arab High Command and the leaders of the Arab nations asked the Arabs, please leave because we're going to be invading Israel. Get out of the way. That's one of the prime. However, we always hear about Resolution 181, 1 and 194. Another thing that we often hear about is the Geneva Convention, the Fourth Geneva Convention. The BDS groups often falsely claim that just the presence of Israeli Jewish towns in Judea and Samaria is an illegal war crime under Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. That is also not true. The Geneva Convention was the Geneva Convention was designed to prevent a recurrence of what the Nazis did, forcible transfers of Jews to extermination and forced labor camps. It speaks about forcible transfers. Israelis who moved to Judea and Samaria were not transferred there forcibly. They went there willingly to be on land that was Jewish land for the millennia.
And Elizabeth, I've got to move on because we're running short on time.
These are two of the main.
I want to turn to Gabe because as a member of the Village Council of Bal Harbour, they passed the first anti-BDS ordinance in the country. And Gabe, you've got a fascinating little story surrounding that. Can you quickly share it with our audience?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So in last summer, we learned that at the end of June of 2015, the United Church of Christ, which is one of the largest Protestant churches in this country with over 1 million members, passed a resolution boycotting and divesting from Israel. At the same time, a few of the states started passing some anti-BDS resolutions. So I reached out to Israel Allies Foundation, who's behind some of those early resolutions, and together we crafted this anti-BDS resolution. And the reason why was because in our community there is a United Church of Christ church called the Church by the Sea, who I knew around the corner was going to try to redevelop. To redevelop, you need to enter into a development agreement with the city, and our law requires any agreement with our municipality to include a representation that the contracting party is not involved in and will not be involved in the boycott or divestment of any authorized trading partner of the United States, including Israel. So just 3 months ago, the church applied for a development agreement to redevelop their church, as I had predicted, and I deferred the item, giving them an opportunity to sit down with me to discuss this issue. I had a surreal meeting with the reverend of the church, a member of the board, and their attorneys. We had about a 3.5-hour meeting where we had the opportunity to discuss the history of BDS and to put plainly to them that whether they know it or not, their church is now part and parcel of the world's largest anti-Semitic movement since the 1940s. And that now it's up to them as an individual church to decide if they're going to continue to be a part of that or they're going to separate themselves both in word and in deed. So what I was able to get from them was a letter which I brought here with me today, which was published. It's a public letter from them repudiating and rejecting their own church's boycott and divestment from Israel. And putting their money where their mouths are, they withdrew over $2.9 million of their investment in the church's investment fund. So the church has its own, the church has an investment arm that invests in accordance with the church's principles. So I was able to get them to withdraw every dollar from that fund and do so publicly, and now, therefore, they're in turn going to be allowed to move forward with their development.
I wish we had a lot of time because there are so many success stories. We are going to be victors in this battle, not victims. I want to address this to Ann. Where does the BDS movement get its financing, and what are their financial and political ties to known terrorist organizations?
So I think one of the main aspects we've heard about BDS is that it's anti-Semitic and discriminatory, but one aspect that people are probably not aware of is that the BDS movement is getting most of its funding from European governments, from taxpayer money, and also from European churches, as well as the Quakers in the United States. And so it's very important, and that's what our organization has been doing, has been tracking this funding, constantly bringing examples to the governments, to officials, to expose what their money is being used for, overt instances of anti-Semitism and BDS campaigns. And in the United States, there has to be a lot more work done on groups like the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, which is now funding the Jewish Voice for Peace, and a lot of additional BDS organizations. They seem to have taken up, some of the funding had been cut off elsewhere, and the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation now appears to be picking up that funding. So that's one organization that people should be focusing their efforts on. And I don't want to say, though, it's all bad news, because if you look especially in Europe, where a lot of this money is coming from, there are at least 5 countries now that are reevaluating their funding for these BDS organizations. Switzerland, there was a lot of news reports about it last week, how they're taking up an inquiry about it. And just today in the Jerusalem Post, there was an article how PayPal has cut off funding for BDS groups in France. You have Germany, Austria, and Italy have also cut off banking to BDS organizations due to their potential links to terror groups, which some of them have, as well as for the fact that they are discriminatory, engaging in discrimination, national origin, and religious discrimination. And you also have governments in Spain and the UK banning boycott movements. And of course, in the United States, we now have, I think, at least 30 states that have adopted anti-BDS legislation, and that's had great impact. For instance, there was a bank in Denmark that had listed an Israeli company for boycott, and Illinois put it on its list of companies that they would not be able to do government contracts with, and as a result of that, that Israeli company was taken off the blacklist by the Danish bank. So these are great developments, and we should continue to push for them and follow the money, follow the money.
All right, I'd like to give all of our participants about a minute or so to make some closing statements or closing thoughts. Carly?
I think if I have 1 minute, what I think is most important for everyone to understand is the crucial nature of being aggressive and proactive in this. We've seen time and time again that the proponents of BDS are very aggressive, they're very proactive, and there are opportunities and there are ways for us now to be aggressive, to take back the territory. We talk about counter speech. We talk about knowing the facts, not being drawn into the narrative, but actually speaking the narrative of truth. Some of the things that Liz has talked about. So I think that this is no longer a time to be able to sit back and just wait and see what happens. It's happening. If it hasn't come to your campus yet or to your community yet, sitting back and just crossing your fingers and hoping it's not going to happen, I think is a fool's errand. And instead, what we need to be doing is being creative, taking advantage of, you heard Dr. Sekulow talk earlier about some of the ways that we've been able to take advantage of the laws that already are on the books, whether it be public accommodation laws, taking advantage of policies at various campuses, taking advantage of the opportunity that we have to draft model legislation. All of these things are ways that we are being proactive, and I think it's crucial now that we all start thinking in those terms in order to, as we've said, it's a must-win situation, and I think that that's crucial in how we do that.
That are available. The Zionist organization actually fought a 6-year battle to have the Office of Civil Rights include Jewish students among the groups that are protected from harassment. And these are very important tools, because if a university violates these harassment requirements, they can lose federal funding. So it's been a very important tool. The Zionist Organization of America has used that to get the first step is usually to deal with the administration, but if that doesn't work, they have hanging over their head the tool of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Extremely important. We've used that, for instance, at Brooklyn College to get changes in policies and an apology to Jewish students who were ousted from a BDS event. Extremely important. The range also includes civil remedies. New York State, for instance, has a human rights law that outlaws discriminatory boycotts. Federal criminal remedies, regular civil remedies such as defamation suits. Ariel University, for instance, brought an anti-boycott case in the Spanish courts because its architecture students had reached the global finals for the world's most environmentally friendly home, and then were excluded because Ariel University is located in Judea and Samaria. So never lose heart that there are many ways that we have many aspects available, and also we are here for you. The Zionist Organization of America has been dealing with this for the past 12 years. We have in-house lawyers. We're working with other groups, many of the other groups that are on the panel here. College students should not be afraid to contact us. Contact COA, contact NBDS.com, contact all of us. We're here for you, to help you. Also, if there are the many rights that you have, for instance, to have attorney, to have representation if a Jewish student gets in trouble and is unfairly targeted by an administration. And please come to us, and also remember there is no occupation. Thank you.
In 2014, Omar Barghouti, one of the leaders of the BDS movement, who, by the way, for all his talk, was educated at Tel Aviv University, one of the universities that he boycotts. In 2014, he issued the following challenge. He said, either smarter people have abandoned Zionism, or the average IQ of Zionists has gone down because they haven't come up with one smart tactic to fight BDS. We're not being cocky about that. I mean, seriously, we're not facing any challenges here. I'll let you decide if he's being cocky about that. And challenging Jews in lawfare it's kind of our national sport. But on behalf of the panel, challenge accepted. I was a rabbi before I became a lawyer, so indulge me for 1 minute if I tell you that the proper response to this BDS war is a paraphrasing from the book of Joshua 1:9. Joshua's about to go wage war on behalf of Israel, and of course it is a serious matter, but God says to him, Yoshua, relax. Be strong and courageous. Have I not commanded you? Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Look at this panel. Does Carly look afraid? Does Liz look afraid? Does Stuart look afraid? No, because they're not. And you should not be afraid either. You heard this morning from ACLJ's chief counsel, Jay Sekulow. He's won so many Supreme Court cases, it's not even fun anymore. He's on your team. And there are so many other people who are here that you haven't heard from. Political lobbyist Jeff Balaban. If you Google Chuck Norris of International Relations, literally his name comes up. He's here. He's on your team. There are hundreds and thousands of people on your team. You're not afraid. Don't be afraid because you're not alone. Now, if you go to endbds.com, remember one name, endbds.com. It's a collaborative effort on behalf of a variety of organizations. It has educational aspects. It has a Know Your Rights pamphlet. Most importantly, it has a 24/7 hotline. If you have a problem, you can call us or send us an email. It goes to the ACLJ, the Brandeis Center. It goes to the International Legal Forum, the Lawfare Project, Stand With Us, and the ZOA. If you need us, we will be there to help you. You're not alone. Don't be afraid.
I'll put in a plug also for our organization. It's NGO Monitor, www.ngo-monitor.org. And on our website, we have dozens of files on all the organizations involved in BDS, their funding sources. You can search by organization. You can search by funder. In addition to that, we have dozens of resources on BDS, on the legal arguments. We do a lot of work at the UN. Our organization is accredited at the UN. And we go to the Human Rights Council sessions. We do a lot of letter writing campaigns and activities there. And you can find all of that information on our website. One of the things that the BDS movement does is traffics in distortions, omissions, and outright falsehoods. And we have a lot of the information, especially for the students, to combat that, because it can feel a little overwhelming when you have someone spouting off a dozen Security Council resolutions to you or legal terms that you may not understand, when if you actually did a little bit of digging behind it, you would find that they are misusing and misrepresenting those terms. So you can come to our website and take a look at that. You can certainly contact us. We're always happy to help. If you're on campus and you need help with writing op-eds or other types of activity, definitely get in touch with us. So thanks.
So you've heard quickly the story or my story in Bal Harbour, Florida. I implore you all to learn about all the laws that have passed in the states and cities across this country. The purpose of these laws are to put a price tag on the decision of joining the BDS movement. We all now have ammunition to fight this war against BDS, but do not assume that someone else is going to use these laws. Do not assume that someone else is going to be out there fighting this for us. They're not. We need each and every one of you and all your friends and all of your communities to be doing this. Press your lawmakers. Use the courts. The laws are powerful tools, but they're only valuable if we use them. Support Israel at every turn. Remember to be proud Jews, to be proud Zionists. And if we all do this, we will defeat BDS. Am Yisrael Chai.
And one last thought. Never again means simply that. Never again. It is not a slogan. It's a commitment. It's a commitment that we have to each other to stand up and protect. I realize during this crazy political season, we have lots of differences between us. But on this one issue, BDS and anti-Semitism, there can be no space or daylight between us. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all our panelists and our moderator for a great discussion. Folks, I'd like to remind everyone that closing session of this conference will take place in conference room 3 and will be live broadcast in this room. So if you want to stay here, you can see this on these screens. There will be coffee and light refreshments right outside. Thanks again, and thank you for coming.